right, folks, let's take a moment and rejoice. That's the flavor of the day today. In our Dhamma sharing by Doug. I don't have to introduce Doug to many of you. He's a very well-renowned teacher throughout the world, and he has been really kind to us. So who's... So he's been really kind to us. It's 2 a.m. for him. He agreed to this, and he's doing it with 3 alarms. He's here with us. Let's get going. You know, he has a certain format in mind. It's very similar to what we did last week with Kong. So take it away, Doug.
So shall I just take it away?
Yep.
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. So so you guys usually start with a sitting. How long do you usually do?
Let's do about 1.5 hours overall.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. And so I usually like to start with the Refuges, Precepts, and Aspirations, and I think you've got a copy of that. Can we put that up on this?
Wonderful.
Ah, okay. So well, I like to do this, you know, it's a traditional call and response, but of course with Zoom, if we all respond with our mics on, we get a lot of gibberish. So what I'd like to do, got the screen sharing on, and I lost all of you guys. Would somebody like to volunteer to be the response voice? And what we'll do is we'll have everybody respond, but there'll only be one mic on.
So can I ask Alice or anybody else to volunteer?
Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So there are many Alices here.
So do I read it out?
Yeah, well, we'll do a call and response, and so. Yep. So half hour. I'm still getting myself organized here. It's 2 in the morning. That will be my excuse for the whole evening. Yeah, so I'll reline, and you can all repeat it back, and we'll just have, I guess, one person with their mic on. Who was that who said they would volunteer? Okay, okay. There we are. Okay, and I may say just a few things to guide us into it a little bit. And then afterwards, I'll talk for a little bit, and you can interrupt me at any time. And in fact, I'll probably stop as we go along and explicitly ask for comments back, because I really like to do these more in dialogue. I guess that's enough. So let's take a moment to settle in. And then repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dhamma.
I take refuge in the Dhamma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
For the second time, I take refuge in my good heart.
For the second time, I take refuge in my good heart.
I take refuge in the natural unfolding of the mind-heart.
I take refuge in the natural unfolding of the mind-heart.
I take refuge in the community of fellow seekers.
I take refuge in the community of fellow seekers.
Those who have walked this path before me.
Those who have walked this path before me.
And the interdependence of beings.
And the interdependence of beings.
For the third time, I take refuge in the Buddha.
For the third time, I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dhamma.
I take refuge in the Dhamma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I undertake the precepts to be peaceful and refrain from harming intentionally.
I undertake the precepts to be peaceful and refrain from harming intentionally.
To be content and refrain from taking what is not freely given.
To be content and refrain from taking what is not freely given.
To be attentive and refrain from sensory entanglement.
To be attentive and refrain from sensory entanglement.
To be truthful and refrain from deceit, gossip, harsh speech, and idle chatter.
To be truthful and refrain from deceit, gossip, harsh speech, and idle chatter.
To be simple and refrain from heedless intoxication.
To be simple and refrain from heedless intoxication.
To be kind and refrain from speaking or acting with ill will.
To be kind and refrain from speaking or acting with ill will.
To be generous with myself and all beings.
To be generous with myself and all beings.
Knowing that one day this body will cease.
Knowing that one day this body will cease.
I seek simplicity, clarity, and acceptance.
I seek simplicity, clarity, and acceptance.
And observe the mind-heart without preference.
And observe the mind-heart without preference.
And take joy in the well-beings of others.
And take joy in the well-being of others.
When sending and receiving kindness feel the same.
When sending and receiving kindness feel the same.
Self dissolves in contentment.
Self dissolves in contentment.
Yearning fades into timeless presence.
Yearning fades into timeless presence.
And eternity merges with this moment right now.
And eternity merges with this moment right now.
Thank you. So let's just continue to settle in. I would invite you to close your eyes or leave them open as you feel comfortable. And mostly just notice how it is with you now. Don't try to judge or change anything. Meditation practices here is about awareness. It's not about controlling anything. We actually do not have control over what arises in the moment. It just comes spontaneously out of past causes and conditions. But how we relate to it can affect the next moment. So just notice how it is. And of course, all of us have these things called preferences which come up. Maybe we prefer the mind to be perfectly still, but it does its own thing. And that's fine. We just want to relate to it with wisdom and kindness. And when their images or thoughts or things distract our attention, we can use the 6 R's, which I assume that you are familiar with. You just recognize what has come up without trying to change anything. You release it, which just means to allow it to be what it is. We relax by simply noting any underlying tension that might be there and allow it to soften. Or allow the mind to expand, to open, to relax, to surrender. And then we return to whatever our object of meditation is. It might be sending out kindness, friendliness to a spiritual friend, or to all beings, or simply to ourselves. It might be sending out uplifted qualities to all beings everywhere. It might be as simple as just noticing that behind all our thoughts and fluttering images, there is a stillness or quiet. It doesn't jump up and down or yell to draw our attention. It's just there, quietly. And we can just let our attention come to rest in this quiet. The stillness, which is always behind all that we experience. And out of which all experience arises. And then we just repeat that process whenever a distraction grabs our attention. Recognize, release, let it be, relax. And allow a simple smile to come up if it's not there already. Return to our primary object, or to nothingness. And then repeat as needed. But again, despite the seeming complexity of all that, it's simply about allowing things to be what they are and noticing, just noticing what's arising with as much clarity and heart as is available to us at this moment. We use the word mindful to describe this process a lot. The word sati could also be translated as heartfulness, or taking things to heart. The mind and the heart really are not completely separate entities. So just to return to mindfulness is also to take things to heart. In just a very simple way. And how is it with you now? No judgment, just noticing. The attention was taken away strongly. You can recognize, release, relax. ReSmile. Return. And then repeat as needed. And otherwise, just being aware with the heart. Aware with a friendly openness about the flow of experience. And also the quiet behind it all, out of which all our experiences arise. Kindness, openness, wildness, expanse, presence. just this moment. Because of the tiny delay in neural transmission, by the time we notice something, it's already at least a split second into the past. So to try to control our experience is like trying to control the past. Good luck with that. So instead, we just notice with a friendliness, with an openness, with spaciousness, with heart. just noticing how the awareness shifts as your eyes open and you come back into the room. So, do you guys take just a little body break, or do you just rush on to the next thing? I'm not sure what the thumb is. That for the body break, or for that just continuing on?
Just keep going.
Okay. Okay. There's really no other option, is there? I really noticed that. It's actually when my mother died, it became profoundly aware of it that, we don't ever get anywhere. It's specific. Or we get someplace and then the path goes on. So we just move along. So I've actually already thrown a lot of stuff at you, including those are my own versions of the Refuge, Precepts, and Aspirations. I had tended to say, and I hope that you did it without me saying that, if there's any stuff in that that doesn't work for you, just ignore it. It's okay. It's okay. But if you had any questions about that, we can, feel free to ask. And sparing that, what I will do is I will talk for a little bit. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I don't know how much you know my background, but I was in the pulpit for 25 years, and my congregation had this little mic. It was just a wire that went over my ear, and so the mic was just right down there. And so I could whisper, and everybody could hear me. And it's really terrible training, for public speaking. So if my voice fades in the background a little bit, just raise your hand or go like that a little bit. Sort of consider that as a volume control. You signal me that and my volume will just go up. I won't even think about it. It'll just happen. And you have other people there at the Metta Center with you. I see a couple of people in the background. Is that true?
Surely. There are about 6 of us here.
Okay. So if anybody has questions or comments they want to insert as we go along, I'll trust that you'll work that out and let me know somehow or other. That's fine. So I guess first of all, thank you for inviting me to join you this evening. And for this topic, Mudita and the 7 R's. So I was assuming by all that you're familiar with the 6 R's, and so we'll get to the 7 R's later if you're not familiar with those. 7 R's is a way of just taking the 6 R's off the cushion out into life. As I said earlier, I will talk for a little bit, and feel free to interrupt me, and I will interrupt myself at times. But I'd like to begin actually on a Sunday morning about 200 years ago, May the 19th, 1841. There was a New England minister by the name of Theodore Parker who delivered a 4-hour-long sermon called The Transient and the Permanent in Christianity to the 28th Congregational Society of Boston, Massachusetts. the congregation had given up meeting in their own church, and they rented out the Boston Music Hall to somehow accommodate the 3,000 people who showed up there each week. There were blacks and whites. This was before the Civil War. Laborers and merchants, threadbare scholars, they all sat elbow to elbow. Theodore Parker's sermons were often printed and distributed. In that time in the United States, the Transient and the Permanent in Christianity was read by more people than had ever read any single publication in the States. And it was right in the middle of the transcendental controversy in New England. Just to summarize what he said, his hour-long stuff in just a few moments. What he said was that Christianity and all religions and all spiritualities, by extension, have many elements in them. Some of these elements are transient. These are practices and beliefs that come and go. They may be right or helpful or wrong or fluff or substantive, but they're not crucial, they're not definitive. And there are other elements which are permanent, which undergird it, which are essential. Without them, spirituality just becomes, vacuous. So, for example, in Parker's day, there were just lots of rites and rituals. There were Sunday morning services, prayers, communions, christening, confessions, and there were lots of beliefs. God the Father was seen as a kind of infinitely perfect Santa Claus who was kind and wise, unless you got on his bad side, in which case he put coal in your stocking and sent you to burn in hell for eternity. And there was also, a belief in God the Son, Jesus, as this divine intermediary between us and God the Father, and if we put our faith in Jesus, he would take care of us, and so on. In a sermon that May morning, Theodore Parker said that all of those elements, all of that is transient and non-essential. Even without Jesus or the Bible, there is an essence in Christianity that transcends all of these, and that's what matters most. But I don't want to talk about any of that this morning, or this evening. It's morning for me. I was sitting in a park along the American River, which is not far from our home right here in Central California, musing about the transient and the permanent in Buddhism. Theodore Parker, who was an incredibly astute person, if he were to reincarnate today, I think he might take to Buddhism. And what might he think about our Buddhist rites and rituals and belief? Which are essential and which are just sideshows. Buddhism has many, many rites and rituals, right? Walking and sitting meditation. Refuges, precepts, Dhamma talks, practice interviews, bowing, repeating metta phrases, the 6 R's, sending metta. We have lots of rites and rituals. We don't think of them as rites and rituals, they're more important than that, but really, they're just things, we repeat. And Buddhism has many beliefs, though we feel better if we call them views. Lots of different views. Dependent origination, right? The importance of mindfulness. Metta, the jhanic path. Anatta, selflessness. Anicca, impermanence. Reincarnation, maybe. So if Theodore Parker really got Buddhism in a deep way, which elements might he think were superfluous? And which are helpful but not essential, and which were essential? What elements, if removed from Buddhism, would fundamentally degrade Buddhism and Buddhist practice and divert practitioners from the essence of Buddhism? What are the elements without which we would all become BINOs? You know, BINOs, Buddhist in name only. Right. So what do you think? What are some things that we might consider as being really essential to Buddhism, and which ones are just sometimes helpful but not of essence?
Like I said, feel free to interact. I've seen Doug's videos and sessions. It's very interactive. It's very non-judgmental as well. So chip in. Anybody here has any views about what is essential and what is not essential? Who are BINOs and who are not?
So for example, meditation. There are lots of different styles, within Theravada, within Mahayana, within Tibetan. How essential is that?
So there's a mention of the Eightfold Path as being essential in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What are some other possibilities? Eightfold Path is a good one.
Four Noble Truths is the important one.
Oops, I couldn't hear that.
Four Noble Truths, I think, is one of the essential things, I think.
It was garbled just a little bit. What is it?
The Four Noble Truths.
Four Noble Truths. Yeah. Yeah, most students of Buddhism and most scholars would say that's probably, the core of it. But what do you do with those? How about the refuges? Bhante Vimalananda asked me not to change the language in them like I did in those, because he said, that traditional wording is what makes you a Buddhist. And I had a great reverence for him, but I laughed when he said that. I said, words are not magical incantations. I said what made me a Buddhist is over the years that I found that there were things which the Buddha said that I agreed with, and things that he said that I didn't agree with. However, over time, I realized that many of the things that I didn't agree with, I didn't actually quite understand. And when I understood, it made more sense to me. And there were some things that I disagreed with the Buddha where he was right and I was wrong. And so I just went through enough of those where after a while I began to think of myself as Buddhist.
So there's a mention of compassion as being essential.
Yes, compassion.
Wisdom.
Wisdom. So as I contemplated the differences between true authentic Buddhism and being a BINO, sitting out there in the woods, part of what happened was these wild turkeys began to wander out of the woods. There were about 15 of them. And they began to mill around me, sort of pecking the ground, looking for seeds and bugs, and they would eye me carefully, and then go back to their foraging. And I realized that they weren't scared of me. Perhaps they sensed my peaceful nature. Perhaps they really got me in some way. Then I thought, nah. Turkeys have these huge bodies and these tiny pea-sized brains, so their reflections were certainly not deep or sophisticated. They probably decided I was safe because I didn't move. For them, movement meant danger, and non-movement meant safety. So my stillness assured them that I was not a threat. I suspect it was that simple. And as I thought that, I wondered, can a turkey be a Buddhist? Probably not. Probably not. You know,
You know,
Buddhism has all these complex views and uh, beyond the mental agility of a turkey. You know, this didn't mean that they were bad, but they cannot be Buddhists. They're probably not even a BINO. But even so, there's a subtlety there that requires a little bit of distinction. It's a distinction between behavior and consciousness. For example, as I was sitting out there with all these turkeys wandering around me, there was a coyote that showed up at the edge of the wood. Could you hear the coyotes here tonight? I wasn't sure if they were coming through.
okay.
You heard, yeah, they sound a little bit like drunken teenagers in the night. These howling. Well, this turkey showed up and was chewing on a squirrel or something. And as the turkeys saw them, they began to emit these, low guttural calls, goo, gah, gobble, gobble, gobble. You know. On the surface, that's pretty stupid, right? When a turkey saw a predator, if it started to squawk, it would just draw the killer's attention and increase the chance that they get taken out of the gene pool. Not so smart. However, as some turkeys gobbled, others looked up and they saw the coyote. And began to whine with the fellow turkeys as they all looked around and saw the danger. And they all joined in the chorus. Soon there was this low ruckus of all of them. So while complaining might alert an unobservant predator to their presence, it would also alert the non-observant turkeys to a clear and present danger. So their collective raucous kept more alive than it killed. And I thought, my goodness, they're taking care of each other at risk to themselves. You know, this made the dumb turkeys seem community consciousness and caring. This was turkey compassion. However, I realized that I was probably just projecting, giving them more credit than they deserved. More likely, the gobbling was just wired in. You know, they felt a little bit of threat, and that just came up spontaneously without any community awareness. I didn't think they were reflecting upon themselves, and they are the well-being of their companions. They just couldn't help it. So this made the flock safer, but this was not metta. It was not compassion. It was not community togetherness. It was, frankly, just an unconscious impulse, probably. No, turkeys were probably not Buddhists, not even BINOs. They were just turkeys. So, let's return to the transient and the permanent in Buddhism, and what is most important to Buddhist consciousness. Currently, my working hypothesis, and the things you said, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, awareness, all those are right up there. But my current working hypothesis is that the real essence of Buddhism, the thing that is really essential to it, is actually mudita. It's actually mudita, the capacity to spontaneously feel joy when seeing the well-being in others. And compassion comes close to that. However, as with the turkeys, what looks like compassion can also just be unconscious reflex arising from the lower brain rather than from the neocortex. We can take care of our young and take care of our community as ways of taking care of our own gene line. Seeming acts of compassion, however, can arise just from biological reflexes. Not all of them do, but they certainly can. However, the feeling of genuine altruism is much more expansive. Mudita requires the capacity to experience others from the inside, as it were, and to be uplifted by their joy and well-being. And if you think of exemplars of Buddhism, the Dalai Lama, Thich Nhat Hanh, even Mother Teresa, they just seem to exude mudita. So, how does that strike you? What are your thoughts? What's the case for and against mudita? And perhaps, even the Eightfold Path, is supportive. But if somebody hadn't heard of that, could they have a consciousness that we would equate with Buddhism? Just humor me with a few of your thoughts. John, yeah, okay, well, I got a yes there.
Somebody goes, why not Upekkha?
Why not Upekkha? Well, I think a case could be made for that. Without some Upekkha, I'm not sure mudita is possible. So it does come back a little bit to which are absolutely essential, and maybe we're not going to sort that out, but those are good thoughts. Other things? I mean, really, we do have all these rites and rituals and stuff. Ananda.
Okay. Well, I think that basically when we develop all of these Buddhist qualities, the Buddhist qualities that we, like the developing the path and everything that you mentioned as being, it could be a rite and ritual or whatever that is. But when we develop them, like selflessness, for example, it makes mudita something that is experienceable, whereas when we're only looking at ourselves and having that self mentality and being very I guess my point would be that developing these qualities are basically all the Eightfold Path, Four Noble Truths, everything that the Buddhas taught brings us the capacity of mudita, I think, which wouldn't be possible, I think, in our normal way of existence if we don't have some level of basic qualities like that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
I don't think it's just Buddhism that has mudita, though.
That's right. I mentioned Mother Teresa, and she's actually Catholic, but has some of that aura. And even within Buddhism, there's some controversy about this. The Theravadan practice, which I assume is closer to our lineage here than the Mahayana, but are the Tibetan. But there are differences within those main schools. The Theravadan has a little more of the belief that you can liberate yourself, while in the Mahayana there's this sense that we're really doing it for all of us and we're all in this together. And those are sort of legitimately open for discussion, throughout our larger tradition. Other thoughts?
If I may ask, Doug, so what are
Sure.
some things that you would consider to be non-essential?
My current working hypothesis is that mudita may be the only essential one, and as Ananda was saying, that there are Mudita is not like, a box unto itself, but it overlaps with lots of other qualities, so that there are the things some of you mentioned, like compassion and a certain amount of selflessness, and uh, I'm not sure that following the Eightfold Path would fall into that, but there is a way that the Eightfold Path sort of cultivates certain qualities or ways of being, and the precepts do. But if you get really down to the essence of it, if the Mudita is missing, then I think it becomes a little bit vacuous.
Very vacuous indeed. I was thinking about something while you were bringing up this topic, and I think a similar question was posed to the Buddha by Mahapajapati Gautami. So she wanted a brief instruction on the path, and the Buddha, I believe he said, letting go or relinquishment is a concise teaching. I might be like completely paraphrasing him, but that's pretty much what I remember.
Yes. No, I think there is some to it, and I've come back around to what I've just really been playing with, and it's a word we associate more with traditional Christianity, but it's actually surrender.
Mm,
And in traditional Christianity, there's a surrender to a divine figure, and we don't have the luxury of that so much. But I think there still is. I mean, the essence of surrender is a kind of a letting go and a deep release. And I'll actually come back to that more in the end. Um, Let me shift gears a little bit, and would just I think it would be interesting to share just a few examples of what Mudita looks like, about how it may manifest. One of my favorite stories about this comes from James Finley, who was, I don't know if if you're familiar with him. He's an author. He was who trained with Thomas Merton, who was a pretty famous 20th century Christian. And James Finley's mother, whom I'll just call Sarah, she grew up attending a Catholic academy, and she was especially fond of her teachers, and one of them in particular, Sister Julia. And they stayed in touch, long after she graduated. And so this was many years later, and Sister Julia had dementia, and she was dying. And so Sarah went to visit her beloved teacher. And it was the Christmas season, so she bought a beautiful rosary and wrapped it up as a Christmas gift. And when Sarah went into Sister Julia's room, the nun was sitting up in bed, and Sarah just offered her the gift and said, "Merry Christmas." And Sister Julia replied, "Well, thank you," and she just placed the gift on the bedside table. And so the two women talked for a while, and the conversation soon drifted around to the Christmas season. And Julia looked over at the gift package and picked it up, and she said, "I have a Christmas present for you." Apparently the nun had completely forgotten that Sarah had just given it to her. And so Sarah accepted the gift, but wasn't quite sure what to do with it, and sat with it, holding it in her lap. And Sister Julia said, "Well, aren't you going to open it?" So so Sarah opened it up and pulled the rosary out of the box. And Julia said, "Do you like it?" And Sarah said, "It's lovely." And Sister Julia said, "Oh, I'm so pleased. I wanted you to be happy." And years later, Sarah still treasured that rosary as one of the most precious gifts she's ever received. That's almost pure Mudita. Let me tell you another story. My wife Erica was at Target. It's one of these big box stores, and she was picking out and buying little tiny bars of soap and little tubes of toothpaste and protein bars and other small items. And as she was going out the checkout, the clerk asked, "So you going on a trip?" And Erica said, "No, these are for people who don't have homes." And the clerk paused for a short moment to sort of take all of it in. And then she smiled slightly and said, "I think you just made my day." Yeah. So that's mudita. That's mudita. So what are some other examples? Ananda.
Well, talking about something that is very frequent in, for example, in Sri Lanka, when there's going to be a meal dana, a meal offering for the sangha or the monks. Every single time there is what we call the punya numodana, which means rejoicing in the merits. And I think that's one of the most obvious places where you could say it's a rite and ritual, but it's also, I guess, helpful in the way that it really emphasizes that we should rejoice in all these meritorious actions, and that's actually the purpose of punya, of merit, basically. So I think that's really beautiful.
Yes, yes. And it is a rite or a ritual. Well, that doesn't make it empty. I mean, part of the reason we do them is that we are creatures that sort of learn more from enacting. And so, yeah, and I'm sure there's sometimes when those go on, what they are just rites and rituals without anything more going on. But it does tend to kind of stimulate and draw that forward and be a reminder. Other examples?
Sorry, Doug.
Yes,
So
yes,
I just
please,
have a question. Thank you for sharing, and I do agree that mudita is really beautiful, and in fact, I think that's one of the four brahmaviharas that doesn't really get mentioned so much, because I think people talk a lot about metta and loving kindness, compassion, karuna, but mudita seems to be slightly overlooked. So I think it's very important. And I do agree that it's really important, but I still don't understand what makes it essential, in your opinion, that makes the others less essential. I still don't really quite understand what the parameter is that that makes you decide, or that leads you to believe that that's the essence.
Yeah. Anybody have any thoughts about that? They want to stick their neck out a little bit.
Tina says, I agree.
I agree with what Sinsin was saying. Absolutely.
Yeah.
There are so many beautiful teachings of the Buddha, and there are many of those that are essential. And it's the combination of them, I think, that makes the Dhamma so special and so different from other religions. So mudita is a beautiful practice, but it also needs to be practiced in conjunction with others.
Right, right, yeah. I actually agree. For me, this whole thing, when you invited me to do this talk on mudita, because I knew you were doing these four on the four brahmaviharas, and I knew I was going to be asked, and I thought, boy, I hope they don't ask me to talk about mudita. I like all the other ones. But it's been a real eye-opener for me to reflect upon it. And I think, for me, part of that Buddhism is really about our deepest well-being, and part of that deepest well-being is seeing beyond the superficiality of what separates us. And when we feel mudita, whether we call it mudita or or upekkha or any of those others, when we feel a mudita, we're actually resonating with the well-being of others. We're actually feeling our interconnectedness. And so there's something about anything that puts us in touch with the reality of our interconnectedness. Everything that we experience, everything that we are, everything that we think of as me, all arises out of this vast interdependent web. And so to think that I have an essence that's separated, from all that is basically a delusion. And so I think in Mudita, in some of that, we actually feel some of that essential interconnectedness, that we simply do not exist. Andy Olinsky has this metaphor for anatta, for selflessness, that I always loved. He said, when it's about weather. So he says when there's a certain temperature and a moisture in the air and the winds are a certain way, and all those factors come together, we get a rainstorm. And when those factors do not come together, we don't have a rainstorm. And we don't imagine that the rainstorm has disappeared into some other dimension or is off in heaven or hiding under a rock to come out. It simply does not exist. And it's the same for everything. It's when causes and conditions and all kinds of stuff come together in a certain way, or a shorthand of that is to say, well, this is Ramesh, and this is Ananda, this is Doug. But the reality behind that all is much more fluid. And so, Mudita and anything that brings that up puts us in touch with the, essential interconnection with all of us.
And Doug, I had I'll have another go in what the Buddha said as what is 1% of the spiritual path, and he says that's friendship.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is taking help from your Kalyana Mittas and also being happy about their own spiritual growth. So in that sense, it seems quite entangled with the concept of Kalyana Mittas.
Yes. Well, and of course, metta, what they always translate as kindness, it actually means friend. So
Right.
it's, I always think it's, that the metta is, it's not a highfalutin quality. It's just a simple, ordinary friendliness. Yeah, I agree with you completely.
Somebody in the chat is asking, what is the difference between mudita and joy? And perhaps you can also elaborate on how is it different to compassion? Because we always talk about compassion as being the driving force behind the Buddha agreeing to teach.
Yes. Yeah, well, so I would start with friendliness, with metta, and when the person we're connected with is in some ways in worse circumstances than us, then we experience that friendliness as karuna, as a kind of compassion. And when the person's well-being their condition feels similar to ours, then we experience that as metta. And when the person is in some ways better off than we are, if there's genuine friendliness there, that's what we experience that as mudita, as a kind of a joy. So they all are part of the same mix. Tell me again, Ramesh, what is our timing here?
You got 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. So let me rush through a couple of things I wanted to get to, and so one is how do we cultivate mudita? And I think one of the most simple ways is just kind of remember it, to include it as part of our daily aspirations. Actually, I inserted it. I tweak those aspirations every once in a while when the language gets a little bit dull. And most recent one I added was, I seek simplicity, clarity, acceptance, observe the mind, heart without preference, and take joy in the well-being of others. And so I think if there's any ways to just remind us, because it is a natural quality, and just a reminder will bring it up. You can take that a little further, and I think another way to cultivate it is just to pause periodically for a few moments as you go through the day. Just for a few moments, not a big deal, and just look back and see if there's been any mudita that arose spontaneously in the past few hours. And if you do that, put your critical mind aside. There's no need to judge. And just see what's there. And it also helps, I think, to notice when the opposite of mudita has been there, just for our awareness. What's the opposite of mudita?
Jealousy, envy.
Jealousy, envy. What's at the core of jealousy and envy?
A bit of comparison.
Yeah, I think probably fear, worry, anger, maybe jealousy and envy, and not so much. But yeah, I think different flavors of fear and separation. And it's just by noticing some of the qualities that sort of clash with mudita a little bit, it kind of makes us more aware of it. The 7 R's is also another way. The 7 R's, the way they work is we use reflect and respond in place of return, because they have the 6 R's, and so the 7 R's are, you just recognize what's going on, you release it, in a sense of just let it be, you relax, ReSmile, kind of a soft Buddha half smile, and then you reflect and respond. In a meditation, the response is always to return to the object of meditation, but off the cushion, we may be called upon to respond to others in some way. And I think it helps to reflect, the reflect step before we respond, to just see what that might be. And then we repeat the whole thing. Another way of, I think, of training mudita is what I was saying earlier about sati, that in the West there's this peculiar thing where we separate the heart and mind, and in most cultures those are not separate, and so just realize that what we are calling mindfulness could also mean taking things to heart. And you can't be really mindful if you don't take it to heart. Wisdom without heart can be stupid, and heartfulness without wisdom can be, Trungpa Rinpoche called it idiot compassion. So the Pali term sati includes both of those. A final way to cultivate mudita is the practice of surrender. Relaxing is essential, but surrender, I think, goes a little further, a little deeper. It feels smoother, to somehow connect, or at least resonate empathetically with another's well-being, until we experience it in ourselves. So before closing, I just want to say a little bit more about surrender, and just pay one last visit to the turkeys. The high end of the Buddhist practice goes out beyond the jhanas. And the practice really gets pretty simple out there. And most of what the practice is just a deeper and deeper relaxation. And is so complete that we even relax the urge to understand what is going on. We just soften and expand and surrender. One way of thinking about this is that there are billions of stars in our galaxy, and there are billions of galaxies probably, And so the chances are that probably chances greater than 99% that there is intelligent life out there. Well, and if this is true, it's silly to think that we are the most evolved beings in the universe. I mean, really. There must be some species out there who's smarter and technologically more advanced than us. And there must be beings out there whose consciousness is more subtle and complex than we can ever know. The consciousness of such a creature may be hard for us to grasp, as hard as it would be for a turkey to grasp human consciousness. But for us, the height of Buddhist practice has to do with direct experiencing more than understanding, with intuition more than cognition, and with surrender more than simply relaxing. So for more evolved beings, what we see as the apex of spirituality, that may just be their starting point. What we see as advanced may for them be just rudimentary. And I think we get hints of that, frankly, in our own practice. One of the hallmarks, of the eighth jhana is that there's just a flow of phenomena that they stop separating out into separate objects. One of the hallmarks of the eighth jhana is this wondering, are we awake or are we asleep? It's hard to discern, sometimes. Another hallmark is there can be images that just, flutter through the mind without weaving into a coherent pattern. And then beyond the jhanas, there's nirodha. And in nirodha, we wink out completely. There's this blank spot. We lose all content, even the sense of the passage of time. And beyond nirodha, there's nibbana. And nibbana is something we enter without knowing. We don't know it. We only recognize it afterwards when we return to normal consciousness and everything feels a little different. But what happened in there? We don't really know. It's beyond us to even remember it. Life seems simple and different, but to move to the highest and deepest awareness available to us, we have to not just relax, but to surrender even the urge to be aware. The highest human awareness is actually no awareness, a paradoxical, unconscious awareness, if you will. That's one to contemplate. When I really get, one of my difficulty with that deep relaxation is quietly thinking that I want to know, or at least know what it's like, but we have to surrender even that gentle aspiration in order to wink out. Have to surrender awareness. When I really get that I can't really get it, the practice becomes simpler and smoother, and I simply surrender beyond myself. So, if you'd like, why don't you close your eyes for a few moments and just let all this settle in. Let everything go. Relax, soften. The relaxation we're talking about here can also feel like expanding. Surrender even knowing what you are doing. Just go for it, even if it seems a little wild and crazy. Just let go, dissipate, surrender. this space of surrender is embedded with mudita. Mudita may arise easily along with other ineffable qualities, so just surrender. Surrender the images in your mind. Surrender the commentary, the storytelling. Surrender self, worry, fear, doubt, preferences. Surrender knowing, being right, attainment. Surrender awareness. Surrender being. Surrender, surrender. Namaste.
Thank you so much, Doug, for your open-hearted sharing and your willingness to be wrong and your working hypothesis and your constant reinvention of the rites and rituals. Great to have you here, and
Thank you.
it's an absolute pleasure. Can I ask Alice to close out this session with some of the announcements for the upcoming events? But before that, can we dedicate the merits?
Would you like me to do that?
Absolutely, Doug.
Oh, okay. Okay. So again, it's just being with where you are right now. And there's this sense of this sort of deep interconnectedness that is more fundamental than just about anything else. So that even whether we believe it or not, when we are taking care of ourselves, we are taking care of others. And when we're taking care of others, we are also caring for ourselves. And so knowing this, we just have this sense of dedicating whatever has been worthwhile here to the well-being of all beings, of which we are a part. May it be so. Blessed be. Namaste.
Thank you, Doug, and thank you everyone for being here. Thanks, Doug, for your talk as well and your sharings and the stories and the very interesting questions as well. And we are very grateful to have you here with us. And as for the announcements next week, so next Wednesday we have Bhante Ananda speaking on the topic of the other brahmaviharas called Karuna as the vehicle of joy. So same time, same place, and we're both online and on Zoom. This Saturday we have a relationships workshop. Ooh. So like relationships workshop with Karen Gills Reid. So please come. It's on Saturday 15th in the afternoon from 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. We also have a Buddhist detox retreat called the Mind Lab event. So if you need a Buddhist detox retreat, come on the weekend of the 19th and 20th of August at Karuna Sanctuary Retreat. So the link, I believe I've sent out, but here it is again. Also, save the date for the Metta Convention Week in September. So the Metta Convention Week is a whole week of Dhamma events, Dhamma talks with different speakers, nationally and internationally. It's really cool. If you want to know more, just rock up to the event. And it opens with a Buddhist bowl trivia on Monday, 25th of September at 7 to 8:30 with Bhante Sujato and Ajahn Brahmali doing a trivia. So Buddhist trivia. I've been to trivia, but not the Buddhist trivia. So that'll be pretty cool. And save the date as well on Metta on the weekend of September 30th and 1st of October. So it's a full weekend, 9 to 5 on Metta Olympics, playing the games of loving kindness. So if you want to know more, please visit Metta Center's website. And if you would like to join the Metta Center's WhatsApp group, which is a group of Metta Center friends, and everyone's welcome, you're welcome too. There's a link that I've sent out. You can just click on the link and you will be automatically joined into our cool chat group. Let me just put it out there. There you go. Thank you, everyone, and see you next week.